I know. Oh.
Did it work? You'll find out. It worked. You're in.
Are we ready with the downstairs?
Yeah, they're on. They're good? Okay. I have no gavel. Someone hit it for me, so I will call the meeting to order. And looking for a motion to establish the agenda.
I move we establish the agenda as published.
Second?
Any discussion? Seeing none, everyone in favor of establishing the agenda as published, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Move on to item 1C, Recognition, School Board Recognition Month.
So this month, communities nationwide are celebrating School Board Recognition Month, and 2020 will be the 25th year of this annual observation, which was initiated by the National School Boards Association. Washington Governor Jay Inslee has issued a proclamation, which is attached to our agenda, to mark the occasion, and the Washington State School Directors Association and the Association of Educational Service Districts and the broader education community will use this time to honor board members from Washington's 295 school districts and 9 elected educational service district boards. Accountability to the communities they represent, school board members are locally elected citizens who have stepped forward to serve for the betterment of their community. Volunteering their time after work or in lieu of family or personal time, these dedicated individuals must navigate a social and economic landscape that is constantly evolving. In total, Washington school directors govern districts serving 1.1 million students with a combined annual budget of over $15 billion and employing about 120,000 people. WASDA exists to support school board members, but it is their efforts that are crucial to building a thriving, equitable system of public education for all students. So thank you to each of you for your dedication to our students, and I would like to present each of you as valuable school board directors a certificate of recognition from WASDA and us.
Big crowd tonight. But
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Moving on to 1D, public input. I am not seeing any public input, so that is closed. And we will move to our student representative report.
Hi. So for this month's report, we actually we got our input a little differently. Normally we've gone to the teachers running the student council of the different schools, but for this time we actually were able to get direct feedback from a lot of students at our superintendent student advisory committee meetings this past month. So you'll definitely be hearing about issues and events that the students actually care about, and there's a lot more voice in the events.
This one will sound a little different. At Northwood, the 5th grade car pickup and crosswalk patrols are going smoothly. 5th graders are also very excited for Islandwood. And with regards to issues, students are concerned with the lack of play equipment at large. For example, only some of the tetherball poles work, which means lots of long lines, which means recess time is wasted. And some Northwood kids also are upset about a new ban on fidget toys in the school.
West Mercer students told us about their school play, Shrek Jr. They told us about Marketplace as well, and the Culture Fair. Additionally, they talked to us about how Parent Playground, where parents can come and play with the students, has low attendance, although it is enjoyed by a lot of the younger students.
Lake Ridge has had a Wizard of Oz play and a steel band concert, both which were a hit with the students. Conversely, there's been a tightening of rules for recess, and kids are no longer allowed to bring their own equipment to recess. And students are at a large were upset with this guideline, and fifth graders started a petition to remove the policy. We are yet to hear an update on the issue.
Island Park had a Jungle Book play and a Scholastic Book Fair, which the students loved. An issue brought up was how, despite having 2 fields for recess, one, the more liked one, is normally closed. Additionally, there were some complaints about that there's no gum policy on Island Park campus, and some students were kind of confused on why that is, and they were a little upset about it.
And something that was generally a concern to the students at the meeting was that there's a lot of inconsistency between the elementary schools. For example, how West Mercer can still bring their equipment to recess, but Lake Ridge kids cannot. And so that's something to be aware of as students are picking up on these differences and they compare themselves to each other. And due to winter break, we were unable to get an update from IMS, but we will have more information next month.
From Mercer Island High School, Unified Sports Club, which is a club where students with special needs play sports with helping partners throughout the year and then compete against other schools. They start their basketball season this weekend, which is really exciting, with an away tournament at Evergreen High School this Saturday.
And on January 4th, Mercer Island Robotics hosted a kickoff event for the 2020 First Robotics Championship game. Robotics leadership put in a ton of time organizing presentations and breakout discussions for teams from Bellevue, Sammamish, and Seattle. Topics included rules, strategy, priority, design, and reenactment of the game. The aim of this event was to foster connections between teams and communities in this program.
Tomorrow, around 220 students will compete in the area DECA competition at the Maidenbauer Center in Bellevue tomorrow. I'm actually a treasurer, and I saw a few of you guys' names on the judge list, so thank you. All of us appreciate it. They will compete in different business competitions and test their problem-solving skills.
CBS Sunday Morning News has come to the high school to do a story about high school stress regarding the college application process. And they interviewed myself and a couple other seniors, Puckett, and they're also looking at different classrooms to film in, so that should be something fun to see.
The high school administration implemented a new no homework policy over winter break, and although some teachers used loopholes and gave quizzes right after and everything, it was overall pretty successful at lowering stress and giving students more time to spend with their family and friends over the break. Also, there's been a continuing conversation about class rank and the competition that it fosters within the school and the stress that it can have on some students. And so we're forming a committee. It's actually just finished being formed with students, parents, and teacher representatives. And meetings are going to start next month to kind of talk about class rank itself and whether we want to keep it or want to get rid of it. And I'm one of the 3 student representatives on the committee.
Additionally, the Mercer Island High School Administration and the Bellevue High School Administration are working together to see if they can change the dynamic between the student bodies to transform it from a bitter rivalry to a more empowering rivalry, perhaps. So that is something that we hopefully will see changes in the near future. Additionally, the band is traveling to Randall, Washington this weekend for their concert band intensive retreat. And hopefully the snow isn't too bad. The semester is also coming to a close very soon, and students and teachers are all preparing for finals the week of the 22nd.
Thank you.
Thank you for the report. Very interesting, different information from the students. And moving on to superintendent update.
So under OE9 this evening, Fred is going to talk to you a little bit about a survey that we have used to gather feedback from our students as they graduate out, and then attempting to gain information from them ongoing after they have graduated. We have several tools that we use, so they'll talk to you a little bit about the report that is attached to the agenda.
All right, good evening. Jamie and I will walk you through some of the information that you've hopefully had a chance to review within the board packet for tonight's meeting. One of the, I think just the big picture items is, we're continuing to try to think about that it's not just about college and career readiness, but it's about getting into college, but getting through college, getting through your career, getting into a career. And so there's a number of ways that we've been trying to reach into that graduation moment and then beyond, and how do we understand how our students are doing as they move through. So we're going to really talk about two different data points that we use. One is the National Clearinghouse. One of your predecessors, Director Jorgensen, he remembers back when UW used to give us a very elaborate printout about students who have come in, how they're doing, and they kind of, they really sunsetted that, and we don't get it specific. University of Oregon still does a little bit of that, but the National Clearinghouse, as Jamie's going to explain, is really our go-to for that academic piece of students going on to college and university. And then the other one is the graduate survey, and I'll do a little talking on that. So let me turn it over to Jamie.
So the National Clearinghouse gathers information from over 3,600 colleges across the country, colleges and universities, both 2-year and 4-year schools. And then it tracks in cohorts students upon their enrollment at private institutions, public institutions, and then if you scroll to the next. So this slide just shows, starting with the class of 2011 up through 2018, the percentage of students of Mercer Island High School graduates who enrolled in a public or private institution as indicated in their first 2 years after high school. If we look at the next slide, we get information about students enrolled in college and their persistence. And so we call it persistence data, looking to see, so they attend the first year, how many of them then return for a second year. And so we're able to track this data longitudinally as well. And then you can see, so this is just the cohort of 2011 grads. So this shows us the green is indicating that they're new to college. So they graduated in the spring of 2011. So in the fall of 11-12, we had 82.2% of our students were new to college. Now you'll notice that over the course of the last 7 years, the Clearinghouse has gathered more schools who are participating. And so you'll see that jump, whereas before 17.5% of students who entered in 2011, that number has decreased over time as far as our ability to track them, because more colleges and universities have joined the Clearinghouse. But then it shows you over time the students who persisted, so the orange is the persistence rate, and then there are students who stopped and enrolled again, so after taking a year or two break, and then there are graduation rates, and then there are those students who no longer are enrolled or did not graduate from college. So we have this for each of our classes beginning in 2011. Obviously, the most recent ones have fewer years, so I wanted to show you one that goes back and shows us over time how our students are doing, how they're persisting, and what their graduation rates are. The final example document, because we have this 45 different pages of reports that we get from them, it just shows the most common institutions of enrollment for our graduates. And I think it's interesting to look and see where our students are attending and the rank in which the schools, we hear a lot about certain universities and yet they're not even on the top 25. And so we focus a lot of energy in certain areas, and yet the majority of our kids do stay in state, and they stay more local. I'm going to talk a little bit. So the National Clearinghouse works directly with another program that we use called Naviance. And at the end, after Fred talks a little bit, I'm going to talk about some of the changes to Naviance and additional data that we're going to be able to gather moving forward that I think will be really interesting and helpful to us as we look at our programming for students.
Jamie, do you have any sense of, I know not all of the colleges and universities participate in the Clearinghouse, do they publish kind of estimates of what percentage of that do or don't? I don't know.
99% participate.
Okay. So that's up from that graph that you showed. That's new learning for me. So that's up from that graph here of why you're showing that delta between the 17.5. Okay.
It doesn't include students who are overseas. So we do, every year, we've got several students who enroll in other countries. So that data is not included here.
Why don't we pause there? Questions on the clearinghouse from the board might be helpful to do it in chunks, because we're going to give you kind of 3 segments here. Okay, we'll come back to that. If you'll help me here, Jamie, on this one. Several years ago, 2016, we entered into a contract and a continuing, it's a 1-year kind of rolling contract with a company called LifeTrack. This is an outside entity that has created a survey, and we give one to our outgoing graduates every year in May as they're getting ready to head out to college, career, and beyond. And then as part of our contract, they have a commitment to us that they will try to follow up with these graduates at least once in the first 18 months after graduation, and then again once before 5 years out. So we're still kind of in the early stages of what does that 5 years out look like? And we're going to talk to you about some of the challenges and sort of shortcomings and some of our wonderings. But I want to start off first with just our graduates themselves and trending data over time. I won't go through every slide, it's in the packet, but you can certainly ask questions on any of those. The first one here, obviously the majority of our students indicate when they're heading out the door that they're headed off to college. The clearinghouse at least would indicate that there must be some changes of mind, at least for some of our graduates, that maybe they don't end up enrolling right away. Over that summer they decide to do something else. But for the most part, you can see they do have an opportunity to select more than one, and so that's why you'll see working part-time or working full-time. Some students are indicating there that while I might be going off to college, I'm also going to be working part-time, and so that's why you see some of the doubling up there. If we go to let's go, just to the next slide. Did MIHS prepare you with adequate skills to make informed career choices? We were working today, and Superintendent Kolosky is going to talk a little bit in her next report about the fundamentals, but I think there's elements of this in the fundamentals, and not that we need another indicator, but if we're just looking at the perceptions of our students on the way out the door, how do they feel about the preparation for their making informed career choices? We do fairly well, and that's a common thing throughout, that our students do have a pretty high perception of, or a positive, favorable perception of their time at MIHS. If we go 2 slides down, Jamie. We thought this was an interesting one. Do you feel you had access to a broad range of electives, including academics, the arts, college and career readiness, extracurricular, when we're talking about the whole child and our commitment there? You can see that over time we've done quite well. The 2019 class, though we don't have the qualitative piece behind it, they're a little less favorable over the 4-year cohort there, but at least over time we're right around that 80% mark there with our students. The next one that we thought was fairly interesting is the slide. It's a similar one to that, but it has to do with comparing athletics to non-athletics. Were opportunities available to be involved outside the classroom in activities besides athletics? I think it's that one right there. I think it's important, we do, as we've indicated in our Title IX reports to you and in our monitoring of athletics, we know that a number of our students are participating in some form of athletics, but in this case, thinking about outside of that, we do quite well here, even with the average. If we took the good and excellent, we do well, but if you add in at least even the average, we're doing fairly well here, especially when you look at the numbers for needs improvement or below there. So then we take a look at the follow-up surveys. These are the surveys, of course, that we've been monitoring over time and that LifeTrack has been sending back to us. What is a little tricky on these responses is that our best bet, where we get our highest response according to LifeTrack, is not through email. Most most of the emails that are sent out, we don't have student emails, and so they might go to parents and hopefully that they forward them on. But our students are changing emails frequently and hardly using email, and so mailing letters to home addresses is our best way to gather feedback. However, there is an opportunity on there that a parent can fill out the survey. They have to indicate that they're the ones filling it out, but that's in these numbers here. So I do want to caution you, it's not a high percentage of all of these, but it is an option. So we're getting some parent perception in this as well. So if we look at, let's go 3 slides in. Since graduating, did any employer or instructor indicate you were lacking in basic skills? You know, when I think about a lot of our grads and the successes that they have on either the state testing or at least ACT, SAT, or you know, college and career readiness pathways, they're doing quite well when they're leaving, and they're indicating that they're still feeling as though they're not getting feedback that they're doing poorly. Although, you know, the no response is always an interesting one here, because if they filled out even one question and then sent it back or did the online, then it will count the whole survey, and then the rest become no responses. So that's why the no response rate. I think some people start the survey, don't complete it, but it still gets calculated in. A few slides down there is the how well did MIHS prepare you for college or career? So a similar type of question there. I think it is indicative, again, where the below average and needs improvement is extremely small there. And so those who are out in the world applying their skills continue to have positive remarks for our school district. Another one we thought was interesting was how well did the required classes provide you with a balanced and varied foundation for future endeavors? Again, at least over time, we've done better on this. 2014 perhaps is where we had the most students questioning that. We've shrunk that down over time, and our students who are reporting back, our 2016 class is really happy about those components there. And so the next one is also indicative of that. So lots of information here. We talked with our college counseling team, our admin team at the high school, kind of thinking about it. So it's just another indicator for us to try to think about, are we capturing all of this information in a way or that we can try to make sense of it. And I think that's where it becomes a little bit difficult, is, you know, how much can we rely on this information? I think it's purely perceptual, obviously, but at least over 4 years we've had favorable trends there. So let me let Jamie talk, or I'll do a little bit on the future of Live Track, stay with that, and then let's go back to Naviance. So we're wondering, and this is where you can help us out. There is a cost that goes with this. It's not a cheap survey. When we think about the Dr. Luthar survey and you know, the money we put into that, it's about equivalent to that. And so there is a pretty good cost on this. We wonder about, you know, it's not a very sophisticated instrument, and so a Google form, especially for our graduates on the way out, we could easily do this exact process. The one that would be harder is how do we go out and get the graduates after they've left. Obviously, we're not getting a huge response, but a decent response, and they do follow-ups or whatnot. But we're really starting to question, is it something that's giving us the information back for us to make great decisions? And so it's just something for you to think about. We haven't finalized our decision, but as you're talking as a team, or the president, vice president are talking to the superintendent, feedback from you would be appreciated about, you know, the direction, how valuable that you see this, and maybe part of your conversation there. Students, certainly your perspectives on this would be helpful too. You obviously haven't taken it yet, but as a graduate coming up, Meghana and Paul, in another year, kind of thinking about that. So let me turn it over, because another opportunity is Naviance, and I'll have Jamie talk about that because it might be able to fill this void as well.
Can I ask on LifeTrack, do we get comparatives versus other school districts? they must be doing it for other school districts. too.
They are doing it for other school districts, and they do not disclose that information to it. So we don't have, I don't even know, when we were originally working with them, they gave us some districts that we could contact for references, but it wasn't they're not distributing out that information. We'd have to go to those districts and ask for it.
The thing would be interesting if LifeTrack could give us similar size districts or similar demographic districts and anonymize it. They don't even have to tell us what district it is. And I think that would help put this in context for us
Right.
as to whether this performance is good or not.
Right.
And I think actually that's the value of doing it through an agency like LifeTrack would be the comparatives from other districts. Otherwise, I'd agree, we could do this on our own and get just as much of value from being non-comparable.
And the 4-year trend, obviously, we're not moving a needle one way or the other greatly over 4 years. So again, would we continue? We could certainly reach out and see if they have maybe rethought that or that they're open to it in an anonymous way.
Thank you.
So an exciting change to Naviance, and that will begin next year for us, are some new capabilities as far as...
To explain Naviance.
Oh, I'm sorry. So Naviance is an online portal, basically, that students use. They started in 8th grade, where they begin their high school and beyond plans. They take career and interest surveys. They then complete components of their college applications. Teachers submit letters of rec through Naviance. And it's got test prep materials, so for ACT, SAT prep materials that students can access. There are opportunities for students to track, based on interest, what schools or what degree programs you would be interested in. So it's kind of a hub for pursuing post-high school education. Did I capture that correctly?
Yeah.
So some of the new capabilities that we are going to have access to next year in Naviance provide us with some information that I think will be helpful for us as we're having conversations, especially our counseling team and building administrative team, talking about course-specific things. So some of the data that we're going to be able to get back are things like degrees earned by students based on ACT score, SAT score, whether or not they took 4 years of math, whether they enrolled in a certain AP course or what their AP scores were. We're going to be able to look at different demographics, GPA, and not only their graduation rates, their persistent rates, but also the types of degrees that they received and the fields that they're entering. I think sometimes we make some gross assumptions about, I'm going into this field. I think it'd be really interesting to track that, to see, is that really what happens? We enter, I'm pre-med, I'm engineering. Well, where do we land? Maybe we land pre-med or we land engineering. Maybe we shift gears and something totally different happens. And so I think that would be really interesting information to bring back to our students and our academic advisors as they're working with students making their plans. And so I'm excited about that. We'll also get information about the number of colleges that students apply to, the number of colleges students are accepted to, again, based on any demographic information or achievement information that we want to filter to get that information. So that information will be coming next year, and there might be an applicable report to provide to you as far as information that we're finding and ways in which it's helping improve the guidance that we provide for students.
Is Naviance a survey or is it just tracking?
So it provides, there are surveys within Naviance. So students would take interest surveys or career interest surveys or, college, what I'm interested in when applying to a college type information. They will then pull their information from the National Clearinghouse. When we get the reports after postgraduate, post-high school graduation, then they're pulling the information from the National Clearinghouse. The National Clearinghouse gives us a set amount of information that they provide for a nominal fee every year. Naviance then will get the data files behind it and really extract it and provide us with filters to be able to then dig into what the data is telling us. But they're not sending out emails to students after the fact. They actually will track them through the National Clearinghouse over time.
So that's personal data that they're looking at and filtering to our students and recognizing our student names and IDs, and so it's much more accurate than a survey.
Correct.
I see.
I was just going to add, that was one of my questions, but my other question was with the life track. Do you know if they're reaching out through social media at all? Because I imagine that's probably a really good way to let kids know.
Yeah, they're, because they're trying to actually link specific grad years to specific surveys so they can track it, it's not so much on the social media. They're trying to make contact with the actual person so that they're taking a survey that they were indeed a graduate, and they're taking, the 2017 graduates aren't taking the 2019 survey. And so that, I did ask that at one point, and they said that's their barrier right now, is unless they're making direct contact, then the data can get skewed.
But they can say, hey, we mailed a survey, you might check with your parents.
True,
It's
absolutely,
at your home.
absolutely. And I don't know their full piece on that. They're using mail, phone, and email to the degree that they have it. So after they make that first contact, then they're getting a bunch of information about, okay, where are you now, so we can follow up with you. But we can certainly press on them as well.
I was just going to say, there's rarely a high school senior who's graduating without their own phone number these days, whereas obviously that didn't used to be the case, and I imagine they don't change as they are going to school. So I would think that, and we know that now, the graduates prefer texting than emails. So I would think that that will make things a lot easier.
Definitely. The challenge for us is we don't have student email or student phone numbers when they're going out the door, because we don't collect that information, and the only emails we have on them. So that could be a change of practice for us, because we don't collect that just based on our relationship with them as students. That's our challenge.
Yeah, I think their phone numbers are much less likely to change than their email addresses at this point. Yeah.
I have a question. So I feel like we have to do some sort of evaluation, and the information that we have so far is informative, but it's basically shining spotlights on areas that we are meeting standards or not, and our standard is really what we identify. So even if we are blowing other districts apart, is 80% success rate good enough for us? So I think that's something that we have to identify. But I wonder with both of these systems, whether they have the capacity to do more qualitative, because questions like, did your schooling prepare you, yes or no? Well, that's nice, right? But then I would like to hear from students in what way they would feel where they would want to be better prepared. And so unless we're willing to dig into those data, then all these things are just, it kind of make us feel kind of good that we're there better than other people. But ultimately, I don't feel like we're making any big practice change at all for our students. So I would like more qualitative data, or maybe we use this information to go back to the students and identify places where we can further have conversation to get more direct information from students.
In terms of LifeTrack, they do not have a qualitative aspect to it. It is purely quantitative on their surveys and their instruments. So that's one of the shortcomings, certainly, of it. Is I agree, there are some aspects of those questions, and some of the questions kind of ask two things at once, and so which one are they answering? So I think there are some flaws in their instrument. There just aren't a lot of companies out there doing this and really pushing on it, I think, because of it's very labor intensive in those years beyond, but there isn't, at least in the LifeTrack component of it.
And just a reminder that much of the qualitative is encompassed in the other surveys that we do for our students starting in 4th grade. And so that comes out in our fundamental reports, and there's questions in there that we really do dive into as to how are we specifically meeting students' needs and their perceptions of how things are going or not. Yes, that isn't given to our students after they leave us, but it certainly gives us a tracking as students progress through our system.
In February, we're going to be back to give an overview on the graduation changes and the requirements there. But the big idea around graduation is that there are kind of 3 pillars. One is students need to pass one of the 8 career pathway or graduation pathways, and we'll get into that in February. They have to obviously complete the 24 credits or whatnot, and then the last one is they have to have a college and career or college and beyond plan, and that's where Naviance comes in. Megan and Paul, I think maybe your perspectives on the college, high school and beyond plan, thank you, through Naviance, maybe your perspective on that. I know that some students find it useful, some feel like we're just going through the motions. We have to have something, but we'd love to hear from you.
My general sense of it is the going through the motions aspect, because usually it's a counselor coming in, you kind of push some buttons and then you forget about Naviance. You don't really use it until senior year when you're trying to get your recs and colleges in. I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I would kind of agree. And we used periods like Islander Hour or like Bridges in the past to kind of check off some of those requirements and the graduation requirements for the high school and beyond plan. And I mean, that's definitely just going through the motions. I have seen Naviance be helpful for a few students if you seek out like a counselor themselves and like work with them one-on-one, and there's some helpful tools in there, because it is a big service with like lots of tools and everything. It's just like you have to get every student to complete all these things, and when we do it in like the large groups, I can't say I see a ton of students taking it seriously, but I know it is like a good service. It just kind of, you have to find the path to like guide the student onto like the important tools.
I will say some of the things we've done in Islander are like career, what's your predicted future and everything. You'll get something like agriculture, and I'm not interested in agriculture, and a lot of students feel the same way, like they're getting things that don't really pertain to them. And I'm not sure what Naviance uses to calculate those kind of things, but perhaps looking into their mechanisms would better make it more useful to students.
I can actually answer that a little bit. I'm not familiar with the specifics of Naviance, but that particular, I think they're drawing on a very, very old US-wide database kind of that, like it's a set of tests that have been done since probably like your parents were in high school, or maybe even your grandparents. I took that test and was told that I would be an excellent forest ranger, because I have to say I would be a terrible forest ranger. So I forget the name of the test, but it's like a specific kind of career preference test that they're probably tied into.
Yeah, no, like, I mean, I think we had to take one the other day. I feel like I've had to take like the same test every year or something, but I mean, I got like postman or delivery driver or something. I mean, it's funny. Like, I mean, a lot of those surveys, you just see jobs that aren't either like, there's not a lot of like new jobs, because like when we're like looking for jobs, there's gonna be so many new jobs that haven't even been invented yet. But I mean, like I was looking at some like the college search tools and stuff like that on Naviance is actually like pretty in depth and useful. But I mean, like those surveys, are kind of a pushover.
Tough for an update.
The high percentage of students who said, answered affirmative and did MIHS prepare you with adequate skills to make informed career choices, it's 80+%. It's interesting. I wonder how that reconciles with how many students chose a major going into freshman year. Like, if I query that, like my kind of evidence around that seems to be less than 5% know their major. Which is kind of counter to the survey.
Yeah, I don't know. We thought about that in terms of how are students interpreting that, and maybe some of it has to do more of the global sense of, did our counselors, did our school help us to think through that process or whatnot. But the exact career or the exact, certainly picking out a major is hard enough for those going to college, let alone a career. For those who are headed there, but we have others who are headed into careers, and maybe there was a moment that helped them, but it was interesting.
Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you. Lots of things to think about.
Actually, do we need feedback from the board as to whether we continue pursuing this, or are you continuing to pursue LifeTrack and/or Naviance? I mean, I personally, I think this is useful. I would like to see how we advance it in the future in some ways, but I don't think I would abandon necessarily doing these type of surveys.
I think we agree. We still have to have some conversation on best tools. Certainly cost being a factor, but not the only factor. And if we're able to do some of these things through a tool like Naviance and adapting Google Forms to it, as Fred started with, we are just in the beginning conversation of how valuable is what we're getting from LifeTrack. I think you posed some good questions for us to go back to them to say, what about this, this, and this? Are these options, as we then, to help us guide a decision as to how do we continue moving forward. I think we all agree that we need to continue to have some kind of format to reach out, but it's the how and what's the best way that we're still contemplating.
And how many surveys are we asking our students as well?
Yeah, it's a lot. We do a lot of surveys, and we do know even, we do kind of question the validity of our seniors in May going out the door as to how relevant their answers are in even that initial one. So I know with myself and probably with you as well, when you get those emails, oh, take a survey if it doesn't tell me how long it's going to be, and how many of those fill-in responses I have to do really determines whether or not I'm going to take the time to do it. So we have to consider all those factors as we contemplate what's the best way to gather this information.
It's also not without cost to do our own survey. Like that's a lot of time for someone in the district if we're trying to do it ourselves. So.
I mean, I just kind of question these things as a whole. I frankly kind of cringe when someone is so steadfast and sure of what they want to do when they're still in their teens, and really love to see when people, whether it's college or different jobs going out and doing, is exploring the world, because high school can only provide so much. And I went in with thinking I knew what I wanted to do, and then got stuck in this major that I hated, because at that point it was too late to change it. And I went to liberal arts college where we had a lot of requirements, and I wish that I wasn't even allowed to kind of start to narrow it down before I did. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like it sends the wrong message too by asking too many of these specific questions. I mean, our grads have no idea what's out there. We don't even know what's out there for them. So just go explore.
I think the clearinghouse and the work we'll be able to maybe get out of the back data from that with Naviance will give us some information as well. And to Director D'Souza's point, it's specific to the students because it's tracking them by that student ID number. So there's still a lot of thinking and contemplation and reaching out to what are the tools and how will they best serve our needs and information to support our kids within the system.
I think our education system might be a little different if we knew for sure, could we help kids identify their majors earlier, or we could determine that maybe that's not our value and we should have a much broader field of education. We kind of have a mix between the two right now, and we do a lot of specialization in our educational system today. Calculus, statistics, computer programming are pretty specialized, and they assume a career path. And is that good or not? And if we follow your thesis, Deborah, it might not be good. We might be better off doing a 1-month computer programming course and a 1-month calculus course, and increase the diversity of things we expose kids to, if your thesis is correct.
Right. And the problem with that, what we do now, is this idea that everyone needs to do this in order to succeed at anything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, anyways, big philosophical question, I don't know. All right. Well, we'll keep discussing. All right, next up we have 2A, full governance process monitoring, board policy 1800 OE6, budget financial planning, level 1.
Good evening. Now it's on. Good evening. Tonight we're bringing you the monitoring for the operational expectation 6 budget and financial planning. This is our interpretation of our compliance with the operational expectation. The OE6 is the guidelines by which we set the budget parameters, how we define what our assumptions are, the type of inputs we receive and put into the budget. And essentially gives us the direction and focus that we need to direct our resources into the classroom and making sure that we're being the most efficient with the resources that we have to maintain our instructional priorities. Question of process, would you like me to read through the document? Go over it for the new board members, or? I'm just curious.
Right, no. I mean, this is a level 1. Does anyone have what we typically do is, when it's all level 1, anyone have any
We can
preference?
make a motion to determine compliance of OE6 as a whole, and then we can just go right into any specific questions we might have, but then it saves us from going through each individual item.
Sounds good. Seeing nods.
I'm happy to move that we determine compliance of OE6 as a whole.
Second.
Any discussion?
I think that's fine, and I think if Ty calls out the highlights to help both new and existing board members, I think that would be useful too.
Okay. First priority is, are we ready?
Mhm.
Okay, just making sure. The first priority is that we maintain staff, parent, community support by focusing resources on classroom instruction. 85% of our budget is staffing. We've for years have, even before it was a compliance mandate, have been at the 17-to-1 staffing ratio for K-3. We've been focusing on classroom instruction by adding instructional coaches and adding additional professional development opportunities so that the classroom environment is our priority focus, and as it should be for the operational expectation is number 1. We consistently are looking at how do we apply the contract within the budget, how do we meet all of the requirements. I believe we've been doing a very good job at providing all the opportunities and expectations that the collective bargaining agreement maintains. We are maintaining an adequate budget reserve. At the end of the fiscal year 18-19, we sat at a little bit over 11%. The board in 18-19 passed a policy that said a floor of 8% with a target of 10.
And just as a reminder, that's in OE7 financial administration. I had to look that up because I thought it was here.
Number 4 there's a lot of moving pieces in number 4. Really looks at how do we use our budget within the educational mandate. We focus exceptionally hard on providing the instructional quality through the coaches and professional development. We've been putting a lot of time and effort into multi-tier systems of support and driving those, as well as threat assessment models, intervention models. How do we really focus our efforts into supporting our students and making this a collaborative, safe, and whole environment? Additionally, we've been looking at, from facility sides, how do we keep our students safe? We had the festival at the high school last year. I believe it was, we have so many projects going, sometimes they get a little fuzzy, but this 1920 is the first school year in which it's fully operational. So we've been looking at how do we continue to provide safe and supportive learning environments. We ensure that we have all the instructional hours as required by the Basic Education Act, appropriate staffing levels, appropriate adequate scope of secondary programs. We still are supporting the 7-period day at the high school, which is providing exceptional opportunities, as well as we have a thriving career and college readiness program at the high school. Significant revenue source from the state. In fact, we are sometimes challenged to find ways to fully spend it because we have to spend it all on career and college readiness. So we are constantly looking for ways to find either new tools, new techniques, new staff. So we are looking at how do we constantly provide new ways of supporting the programs within the buildings. In section 5, the budget presentation, we worked very hard to provide regular updates in terms of starting soon, in terms of what our assumptions are when we go into the budget. In terms of revenue assumptions, revenue is driven mainly by student enrollment. So we take a look at our enrollment forecasts, our trends, what's coming up, where we've been. We also look at what are we putting into our assumptions in terms of community support between the PTAs and the foundations, and state support as well as safety net. So we've been trying to find a lot of ways in which we can communicate all of our assumptions in clear fashions. We've made some updates to the guide to the budget, which we produce in August. So hopefully that becomes a much more consistent, clear document that is much more transparent about what our assumptions are and what we're doing with the community's funds. We'll probably be making some further refinements to it this year in August. And allowing the board to understand the relationship between the budget and the priorities for the year. As I mentioned, we are constantly coming to you, letting you know what our thoughts are in terms of what our priorities for the upcoming year. We are looking at just a snapshot. We are fairly consistent for staffing this year, just a few minor changes here and there. We are looking at adding 2 instructional coaches, one to the middle school and one to the high school, so that each building this year in 1920, each building has their own coach. We'll have 2 coaches for both of the secondary buildings in 2020, 2021. I think I have the right number of 20s. As well as one of the things that we've been looking at, one of our priorities is sustainable staffing. How do we have sustainable staffing and making sure that all of our staffing is accounted for and provided for in ways that we can meet all of our obligations to the staff. One of the concerns that we've had is some of the para-educators in the district have been for a very long time funded through the PTAs. We are stepping back how much support that can bring, and we are taking a lot of those hours back into the district budget, and we're going to be using that to redirect in ways of providing multi-tier system of supports in the building. Looking at how do we increase those supports and responses to intervention. And is presented to the board with adequate time for review and approval before September 1st. We hold 2 meetings in August. One is just a quick first read of the budget, general review and assumptions of the budget, and then we have the public hearing. We try very hard to make sure that we are giving the board and the community plenty of time to review all of our assumptions and what we are presenting before it's adopted. Any questions?
So just as an explanation, this is what the board holds the superintendent accountable for, and this ensures that the budget is aligned with the priorities of the board. And so this is a pretty important step in the continuous evaluation of the superintendent. So the superintendent is evaluated on a each meeting basis. Actually, I think something like this pops up. And so there are no surprises at the end when you give the final superintendent evaluation. So this one, where, as a board, we are evaluating on the current language. And I think next meeting, we get to update the language if we so choose.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Mine kind of had to do with language review and item number 3, because we did change that in a different item. So we're judging this on as it was written over the last year. And then I assume at our next language review, we'll update this policy to match our other financial policy that talks about budget reserve as opposed to credit rating. Yeah. That was my,
Yes.
thank you.
All in favor of finding the superintendent in compliance with OE6 budget financial planning, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Board finds the superintendent in compliance of OE6. And next we have board policy 1800 OE8, asset protection, which is monitored at level 1 as well.
So OE8 is asset protection. It really, it's more about maintaining appropriate insurance coverage. How are we ensuring that our physical and intellectual assets are protected? As with the previous OE, what's the procedure that you would like to follow?
I will see if we have a motion to start.
I happily move that we determine compliance of OE8 asset protection as a whole.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion or explanation?
OE8 is really more about how does the district safeguard our assets. In terms of insurance coverage, we are covered under the Washington Schools Risk Management Pool, WSRMP. And they are a conglomerate of multiple districts throughout the state, large, medium, and small, that work to help provide liability, physical, auto, essentially all coverage for the district. We work closely with the insurance pool to make sure that we have appropriate coverage throughout the year. And on an annual basis, we've been going through risk assessments. This year we have more of a program review. In previous years, they've had several different topics based on concerns of trends that they've seen within the insurance industry, almost, also within the education realm. Sexual assault prevention, physical asset protection, just all different types of things. This year it's more based on the district's actual loss histories and issues. We were working with the transportation department. We've had a fantastic run of compliance and safety due to, yes, not based in part to Director Battersby's work with updating policies and compliance and training within the Human Resources Department, and the exceptional staff that we have and the students that we have. We are very low. When the consultants come, they look at us and say, we have a hard time finding something for you to deal with or improve on. So when it comes to asset compliance insurance, we've been doing a very good job. We are covered for 100% of losses for district property, for theft and casualty. We maintain appropriate coverage for liability losses for the board members as well as staff. And it is reasonable for the district. We do not allow unbonded or unsecured personnel to access material amounts of district and school funds. So the only people that are allowed access to school funds are district employees that have been background checked and are vetted and trusted. We ensure that our facilities and equipment are not subject to inappropriate wear and tear or insufficient maintenance.
And we do need to give a shout out on this one to our
Yes.
Director of Maintenance and Operations, Tony Kuhn, and his team, because they do an amazing job, as does our mechanic in our transportation department as well, is really protecting our assets across the entire district.
We have managed to keep our buildings running exceptionally well for the age and the use that they see. Our buildings are probably some of the most used school buildings I've ever seen, just in terms of volume of community use in and out the building before and after school. So the wear and tear that we would normally expect to see has been mitigated by the exceptional efforts of our maintenance and operations staff. Not necessarily expose the district and board and staff to legal liability. We worked very hard not to expose the board in terms of our policy and compliance efforts, and protect intellectual property information files and fixed assets from loss or significant damage. We've been working very hard this year in terms of communicating with staff about phishing scams. It's been kicking up recently in terms of communications coming in. So we've been on, Director Ronser has been on a campaign of district protection in terms of sending out information to all the staff about what not to do. Properly preserve and dispose of all records related to affairs of district and business. We have very strict record keeping policies in the central office, and we're looking at moving towards electronic record systems, so moving paperless in the near future. All of our investments are managed by King County Treasurer. They maintain the investment pool, so we don't have to, and it is vetted and audited from every different angle. And we do not lease, and we are not in the process of acquiring or disposing of real property. And we work very hard through our compliance efforts, through our transparency efforts and communication, to not endanger the district's public image, its credibility, or its ability to accomplish its mission. Any questions?
And this is a language thing, so I understand I'll have a chance to review this
Okay.
probably next week, so
Mhm.
I'll just save it.
If you have a question,
Okay,
about it.
my question is just about number 9, because that doesn't seem quite right, because it's not like the district can never, acquire, et cetera, or dispose of real property. It just seems like it should say something like, without full, notification and discussion and agreement of the board, something like that. Because the other things are things that you definitely shouldn't do.
Yeah. And I
Makes sense.
think that probably is just a language artifact from prior. Historically, the district has disposed of property, large amounts of property, and this is probably an effort to stop disposing of property, because we are now in a bit of a bind when it comes to if we were to replace buildings, where do we put them?
Right.
This might be an interest for you to look at in the future, but there is some history associated with it.
That makes sense. Thanks.
A mention, along with all things here, but meeting recently with the Legislative Committee and working with Legal and Policy at WASDA, Abigail Westbrook, who helps to give us notices, and I know that WASA also has that, and WASBO, and to everybody here on the staff, including Kendall, who manages all of the changes in law and all the changes that have to happen within our policies. It's a lot to keep track of, it's a lot to handle, and the fact that you're so clear and precise in letting us know when those changes are happening, how they're happening, we regularly receive those updates from Kendall. It's a huge team of people that keep us compliant with the law, and that is a huge service to us as a board, because ultimately we are responsible for that. So I just want to say extreme appreciation to all of you for helping to keep us legal and up to date with all of the changes that are constantly happening. So kudos.
Any other questions or comments? So we are all in favor of finding the superintendent in compliance with OE8 asset protection. Please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Motion passes 5-0, and the superintendent is found to be in compliance with OE8. And next up, we have post-monitoring language review for Board Policy 1800 OE9, Communication and Support to the Board. I will give a few moments to review it, see if anyone has any notes on that, and we can take suggestions, if any.
I have a question. I'm just curious on number, number 3. Annually provide the board a summary of the number of and on presidential election years, the reason for students who have entered, left, or chosen not to enroll in the district. I'm just curious why presidential election year. What's the rationale behind that?
I will let someone with the history on that explain that.
I have the history on that. It was really a matter of how often would we want to pull all of that data together, just the time that goes into it. So the interest of previous boards was at least to know how many students are coming and going, attending private schools or whatnot. The boards prior to you had decided that they didn't need to know all the exact qualitative reasons, except once every 4 years to come up with a summary of what are we learning from stakeholders. So it was just a matter of they didn't feel like they needed that every year.
If we're to change the language, that's an area I would want to bring up for us to talk about. I think every 4 years is too big of a long of a time to understand why students are leaving the district, in particular because it won't give us enough time to address some of those concerns. So I do understand how do we balance the work that is part of this, but then how do we also be really flexible and nimble in addressing these issues, especially when we have a small school district. Having a number of students leave really impacts our budget. So I know when I'm on at the university, they're really focused on student retention because it impacts the bottom line. But for me, it's also really it's indicative of some of the issues that may be latent and that we're dealing with, and it's really important for us to know the reasons why people are leaving. So at least at minimum, I would like to for us to talk about potentially every 2 years. 4 years is.
I agree with Director Din because 4 years is someone's entire high school education. So if there were kids leaving, in 8th grade, we might not find out why until until they were seniors, until they would have been seniors. It seems like a big gap. How much effort would be involved in doing that every 2 years instead of every 4 years?
It's just a matter of pulling. We give the survey 2 times a year, once at the end of January and then once again at the end of August, and we try to capture all of the families who would have left between those 2 periods of time. It's just a matter of pulling all that information and just spending the time on it. So I don't know how much time, but it's just the priority of, if that's what the priority is, then that's what we pull together and spend it in that way.
So we already have the data, it's just a question of taking the time to look at it and.
Right, so we pull it and we're looking at the anecdotal pieces as it's coming in as a district or whatnot, putting it into a report for you. That would be just the next step that we would need to do every other year.
Thanks.
Any other thoughts? I'm wondering if we can, if it saves work, if we can pull out the people that are moving due to, or leave the district due to relocation.
All of these are individual surveys, so it is a lot of handwork that someone physically has to go in, as Assistant Superintendent Rundle was explaining. It's not one that we could easily disaggregate out by our Skyward system, for example, because we poll and ask our families who are leaving to take a survey, just similar to what we do with our seniors. Some choose to, some don't, so we get the best information we can get, but then someone has to disaggregate all of that information. An employee would then have to take all of that, put it into the different categories within the survey, any anecdotal pieces of dissatisfaction as to why. And then pulling something outside is really just more work to what the survey has asked.
So we will be doing the survey this year for 2020.
Correct.
And it'll be an opportunity for new and existing board members to see the results. We'll have a better understanding of what the cost is to the district to make those changes. And then this will be up for review again for language review thereafter. So that might be more insightful opportunity to make that request after you see the results and see if they're valuable or not, and if the board can take action based on that.
But it seems like we're already collecting the data, we're just not presenting the data. And for the number of students who actually leave the district, is it around like 30 or 40? Because those are, and it's already, you're capturing this on electronic survey format, is that correct? It's not a handwritten survey.
Yes,
So
I
can
don't
forward-
know the exact mechanism prior to when I knew I was going to be responsible. So we created a Google form 4 years ago to start collecting it. So after the last report. So prior to that, I don't know what it looked like as much. Since then, that's when we've been doing these biannual surveys using Google Forms. And what we literally do is take all of the email addresses of the families who left and then, send it to them and we get a decent return on them. We don't get, not everyone responds, but, so it's just sitting in, we just would have to download and put it all together and then put it into a report for you.
I'm okay with waiting since it's happening this year anyway. I'm okay with waiting to make that change, but could we ask that you, whoever's doing it this year, just kind of pay attention to how much time is involved so that you can give us an estimate, like, wow, this took, 2 weeks of my life, versus like, oh, it was a couple extra hours, that'd be helpful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also adding in, if I look at the language of number 3, it clarifies that students who have entered, left, or chosen not to enroll. So it's a much larger pool of students than I think what you're specifically looking at, which I think that's a great question of the students who are exiting the system unexpectedly. But what 3 is asking for is actually a much larger pool. So those students who may be residents but never enrolled in the school district. And so, yeah, that seems, that's a lot, it's a bigger pool.
Although don't we want to know why they didn't choose to enroll? Like maybe we're not offering some service that they need.
I think this is a great conversation, and I agree with the importance of knowing this information. We tend to have the cycles of concerns about different topic areas and needs of kids, and being able to address it sooner rather than later is really crucial. So I'm not hearing a motion and waiting to see, does anyone know when this is reported?
It will be in the December 2020 board meeting, it'll be because you're doing language review now, so it'll be basically the last meeting of the calendar.
It'll be part of the compliance for OE9.
All right. So it's not going to happen until a year from now, almost a year from now. So I think enough of us, this is an important issue. I think we'll be able to come back to this after the report of 2020, unless there's another motion.
No, I'll wait until we see what's presented.
Great. Any other suggestions for language review? I have one. I think it's a fairly minor. Number 14 is about, it's not what you think I'm going to say. I mean, I'm not going to say what you're thinking. I just don't think it's written well. Provide to the board a monthly report if needed, an annual report summarizing all the Public Records Act. Provide to the board, it should be provide to the board an annual report summarizing, and then we can put either in parentheses a monthly report if needed or something like that, but
Just the language.
it's the language. I'm perfectly happy with getting it yearly, and I'm confident that it will be brought to our attention if there's a concern in a monthly report. I haven't seen a need to receive that more often. I just think we should fix that language.
I totally agree. You could say something like provide to the board, reports on all Public Records Act requests received by the district in a prior year, comma, a monthly report if needed, as well as an annual report summarizing a year, something like that. Something like that. It's also just because the object is like in a weird
Right.
place, it's just a little hard to follow.
Okay, so it looks to me like Director Battersby is in agreement, and we'll probably propose something. So we'll put this,
You can put it on the agenda.
put it on the agenda for the next meeting and look at some proposed language.
How would the board know a monthly report is needed?
I think it's our obligation to keep you informed if there's a sudden increase or if you become concerned. So, and that would be through communications from the superintendent to you or from myself as the public records officer to the board. If there's a sudden uptick or if there's something concerning or if you become concerned because of any feedback that you receive from community members, which I think in the past we have had discussions regarding the timeliness and the appropriateness of our reporting on Public Records Act. So that would be the how, would be the if needed. So it would be the onus on either the district through the superintendent or myself to self-report that there's something different going on, or you are independently having concerns.
And instead of saying if needed, we could actually be specific and say if there's some sort of variance, come up with language that actually identifies when it's needed.
So the city, it's updated in real time. I think this is the board consensus seems to be yearly is fine for school district transparency. And then we defer to the district to tell us if we need to know kind of more frequently. It seems to be the policy.
Correct. That is
Okay.
And I think people can actually submit a public records request to see how many requests there are.
They can.
That's true, and they can also request specific requests. I actually filled one today, where I want all the requests that were made in the last week. Okay.
So, all right, so we will,
Oh, I was just going to add in, I think we've had this conversation as well as a board when this was presented to, of the difference between the city's automated system for public records requests and that of the school district. It's because we're dealing with minors and confidential information that we really need or want to have human eyes on those documents before that information is released to ensure that nothing is is going out that shouldn't be going out, which is a little bit different than possibly records for the city.
All right, so I think we're comfortable with bringing this back for putting it on the next agenda and reviewing number 14 to frankly just make sure it's a little bit clearer in what the expectations are. Do we have any other suggestions for language review? We will move on to number 4, consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda as published.
A second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the consent agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. The consent agenda is approved. Superintendent Kowalski.
So a few things for you tonight. First up, in reference to Director Jeannie Upton's comments regarding legal updates, we did have a very recent one where WASDA was tasked by OSPI in developing a model policy to fulfill the bill on school-based threat assessment. And we've reported to you previously that we are already engaged in that work, and we will continue to be engaged in the work, but we will be bringing to the board in the next couple of months that policy, because it is not a current policy, and we will need to have it to be in compliance with the law. And I'll be giving you some of that information in communications that I provide to you on a weekly basis as well. Just some other things to consider. As a reminder, the January 16th board special meeting events have been rescheduled as follows. The board linkage session with the community service groups such as Rotary and the Chamber of Commerce and Kiwanis, etc., has been rescheduled from the January 16th, 7:30 a.m. to February 6th at 7:30 a.m. It will occur right prior to the already scheduled linkage with the Mercer Island Schools Foundation Board, which will then be later in the morning. And then following that linkage, we will have the board annual study session that will be focused on policy governance and board communication. And the other portion of the January 16th session will occur as an exempt session prior to the regular meeting on January 23rd, starting at 4:30. Also, this spring, we are scheduled to engage in the work of reviewing a revised superintendent interpretation of Fundamentals 4, 5, and 6. This year was for 2, 4, 5, and 6, and 2 has already occurred. But as staff started to review these 3 fundamentals, we generated a lot of questions regarding how the language of these 3 fundamentals aligns with the new board policy 001 and the values, vision, and mission statements. And so we really, as we were discussing it and looking through the interpretations and the fundamental language themselves, felt it would be necessary to have further discussion with the board around these particular fundamentals in order to really create alignment across the values, vision, and mission and the priorities or fundamentals as they're monitored. So I'd like to suggest that I work with the president and the vice president to establish in later in February or March a study session to have discussion around that work of fundamentals 4, 5, and 6. And then lastly, just for anybody out there who's watching or listening, please be sure to have Flash Alert updated and activated on your phone. It sometimes will drop off. And as a reminder to all of our MISD families, make sure that your contact information on our Skyward Student Information System is accurate, particularly the primary phone contact, as our school messenger system uses this as a communication tool for emergency and or weather-related school interruptions. And as we watch the weather forecast, we just want to make sure that we can communicate with everyone as necessary. So that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm getting myself lost here. We are moving on to board announcements, inquiries, and reports. And first item up is to review board assignments. So we need to look at some board assignments for school liaisons. We have West Mercer and Island Middle School that needs coverage, as well as the superintendent community advisory. I see on here that the superintendent teaching and learning advisory it says TBD. It has been me this year, but if someone's dying to do it, they're welcome to take it. But I think there's 3 meetings left. So either way. But let's start with the school liaisons. Do we have a preference from our directors? It looks like we do.
I would like the West Mercer Elementary. Fridays are perfect for me.
That works fine. I've already actually been to one of the IMS PAC meetings, so happy to keep doing that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. And then is there someone that's interested, either one of you interested in the superintendent community advisory? Has 2 more meetings for the year, one in February, one in May, and they are Wednesdays, 9:30.
My seniors would not like that.
I can do that.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
And you will continue.
I will continue with the teaching and learning unless someone is wanting that. Okay.
Thank you.
And now for announcements, inquiries, reports. Director Den. Any report?
Any new report? No, I'm just excited for 2020 and looking forward to another exciting year with my fellow board directors and our student representative and Superintendent Klosky and all the wonderful staff here at our school district. So yeah, but no report.
Echo the Happy New Year as well to everyone. And 2 things. I'm looking forward to the DECA competition tomorrow, so I'm very excited. I get to be a judge again. So that's always been an exciting time. I just wish my kids did. And number 2 was I did have the high school PAC meeting. I think it might have been this morning actually. And there was a big focus on the mental health counselors and the work they're doing on the high school, the importance of it continuing and continuing to be funded. Looks like, and they gave parents a deep overview around what is being done. So it was very, very useful information for the 2 of you. Thank you.
I'm excited to get rolling in 2020. So I mentioned last weekend I met with the legislative committee through the Washington State School Directors Association. So we're busy preparing for our Day on the Hill coming up soon. I brought some gifts. So in your spots there's our 1-pagers, which are very different this year. 3 focus groups for WASDA, and then kind of a breakout of what those 3 groups mean for us. You can also find legislative priorities from the Association of Washington School Principals. Their 2020 legislative priorities are listed on their website, as well as WASA, the Washington Association of School Administrators. WASBO is very tricky to pin down on the legislative priorities, but we'll find that soon. And also has been shared with me, the Association of Washington Student Leaders has their legislative priorities also available. So the reason I'm talking about this is legislative session opens on Monday, the 13th. So here we go. And then we're busy preparing for our February trip to the Hill. But I already got some updates on some things that we should be watching for and advocating for as we head into the opening of the session. LEA, which would be Levy Equalization Assistance, is maybe some law changes and some bills coming out to tweak the language on that. Again, those formulas. SEB is going to be a point of discussion this year, not necessarily financially, but there's at least one bill being proposed already that would tweak some of the people who qualify for SEB and some of the parameters around that. No big rocks being moved, some little stuff, but it is there, so it'll be interesting to watch how that moves through the legislature. Also, we can expect there are 2 bills waiting on deck for the Sexual Health education, which was proposed by Senator Wilson last year and is moving forward. Another bill, which is slightly different, is moving forward. So this, I think, is going to continue to be a conversation that we should be prepared for. To say it was an interesting conversation on legislative committee is an understatement. It's 24 individuals who represent 11 areas from across the state, and there's a lot of discussion around this, from whether it's an unfunded mandate to local control to curriculum, but it is a priority for Superintendent Reichdahl, so we want to watch that closely. And then also changes that continue to move, potential changes with special education and different parameters of funding for that. But overall, the message was we shouldn't expect much to happen financially for education, and that most people on the Hill are a little tired of hearing about education. So as we choose our priorities, to really focus in, open with a smile, but be persistent, insistent, and consistent as we work with our legislators. Connected with that through WASDA and the National School Boards Association, I am booked through the Federal Relations Network. I'm headed to Washington, D.C. on January 31st. I'll be there through the 5th of February for the Equity Symposium.
DC in February.
And yeah, it's going to be delightful. And the Advocacy Institute, we already, I believe, have appointments with our senators, Cantwell and Murray. I'm working with our new contacts with Representative Smith to see if we can get an appointment in for the 9th. And then Washington State is one of only 3 or 4 that have a standing appointment with the Department of Education and the Office of the Secretary of Education. So I don't know that I'll swing being on that delegation, but it's exciting nonetheless. So that's happening the beginning of February. Then the 9th and the 10th of February, the next weekend, is the WASDA-WASA-WASBO Day on the Hill. We have 5 individuals from our district representing at the conference on Sunday. So currently registered, we've got the superintendent. I'll be there as your legislative representative. Our 2 student representatives that are there. And Director Bergstrom, are you scheduled for us to join us this year? Or no, Principal Puckett.
Principal Puckett
Will be joining us. There's usually pretty limited capacity at the conference, although it's fabulous. There's still time if more might want to join. And you're always welcome to join us on the 10th when we actually will have appointments, and I'm making those appointments right now with Representatives Sen and Tai and Senator Wellman. That'll happen on Monday the 10th. We usually get 15 minutes or so with them, led by, we've learned, our amazing students, student representatives. Part of the reason I wanted to get these out is to share them, is so that you can talk to your fellow students to see how these impact you. All right, let's see. That's all of that. And then my last thing for my report is February 27th, we do have a board meeting, and I've been informed by my wife and daughter that we have tickets to something that night that I'm not allowed to know. So I will not be at the February 27th board meeting. Please forgive me. Thank you.
I don't have anything to report, but I just wanted to say I hope no one gets snowed in this weekend, especially our band kids and faculty and parent chaperones. Fingers crossed.
I'm looking at the agenda and realizing that we left off legislative reports. So thank you for double teaming. I'm guessing what happened was when we added in the review board assignments, that legislative update probably got bumped out. But I am not worried. I'm sure Director Janini Upton will always keep us informed. So thank you for all of those reports. I also am excited about starting off this new year. We can have debates about whether or not the new decade or not. Just want to say, as winter sports are winding down to as they get into their championships, just good luck to all of our student athletes, and our high school students will be hitting finals soon. So good luck to all of you, and remember that it's just a test. And go find some puppies to play with too. So that's it. So we are now have an executive session. So I'm looking for a motion to move into executive session pursuant to RCW 4230 110 1G to review performance of a public employee.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. So we will be moving into executive session. Approximately 30 minutes. And there will be no final action taken. So at 7:36, we will move into executive session.
You get signatures before you go.
So,
Islandwood is next week.
So
Yep.
he's like, if we have a snow day, then we want to take the snow.
No. Joey went and it was snowing there at the time that they were there and they had a ball. So
Oh, no.
it's all, they just want an extra day off.
Yes, they want extra day.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, just remind the students that if there's a snow day, we have to
We only want to these, so that's it.
So it's not like just, we get a day off.
Can you turn that off?
Yeah.
I don't think it's.
Oh, you did